friends. I'm your host, Erin Port, and welcome to the Simple Purposeful Living podcast. Life can be overwhelming and busy, so once a week, I invite you to join me, and together we will make simple tweaks to uncomplicate the hard parts of our life so we can spend more time doing what we love. Welcome back to the final episode of our Tiny Tweaks Happy Life podcast series. Today, I am beyond thrilled to be joined by Dr. Morgan Cutlip. She is a PhD in psychology, she's a speaker, and she's author of 2 books, Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself and A Better Share. I've read both, and they are fantastic. Morgan is a trusted voice and a guiding light for women, especially moms, wrestling with guilt, burnout, and the invisible mental load. When I was thinking about how to wrap up this series, especially the section on maintaining the momentum, Morgan immediately came to mind. This part of the journey can feel the hardest, where old patterns creep in, where self-doubt can slow us down, and where life's obstacles can either derail us or become the fuel that keeps us moving forward. And Morgan is the perfect voice for this conversation. Thanks, Morgan, for being here and sharing your wisdom with my readers.
Yeah, thank you for having me. What a generous introduction.
Well, it's well-deserved, and you have spoken such encouragement, unbeknownst to you, into my life through your books, and so I was excited to have you. But what made you so passionate about this work? Was there a moment in your own life where you realized something had to change and you wanted to help women do the same?
Yeah, really the passion for these topics came out of my experience becoming a mom, becoming a parent, and specifically a mom. And I had worked in the relationship education field for, I don't know, maybe around like 7 to 10 years, officially, and then unofficially I was doing it much earlier, much younger. I've been working in that field for a very, very long time, and I sort of felt like going into motherhood, I knew exactly what to do to absolutely crush it. I felt like somehow these degrees have prepared me to be the best mom ever. And very quickly, I was put in my place. The temperament of our daughter's name is Effie. Her temperament took me by surprise. I think the insane amount of responsibilities on my plate took me by surprise. The resentment I very quickly developed toward my husband, whom I love so much, and we had a great marriage. That caught me off guard, and I just knew, with all of the resources I had in terms of support, in terms of know-how and all of these things, if I'm feeling this way, I know women everywhere are also feeling this way. And I knew, at that moment, I was sort of like living in the fog of early motherhood. And so it was one of those, I'm going to put a pin in it. I don't know what's going to be helpful, but I do know that I have the skill sets to figure that out. And I will test these things out in my own life. And eventually, when the fog lifted a bit, I really had just such a big heart and desire to really help women with these 2 main areas, which is like how we lose ourselves so easily in our family lives, in our motherhood experience, and also how do we navigate the massive amount of responsibilities that come with being a modern family in a way that really preserves our relationship.
As women, as you said, we kind of lose ourselves. And many of us have been conditioned either culturally or personally to be everything to everyone. I know I felt that way. And to me, everyone else's needs first and put ourselves last. You touch on that, like you said, in both books. Can you talk about how that conditioning doesn't just burn us out, but actually derails our momentum, whether it's in our goals, our careers, or just living our life with more intention?
Yeah, I think so. My understanding and how I sort of understand how we end up putting our needs last is sort of like the intersection of a few things. So first, I think socially we're just conditioned as women to self-sacrifice for the preservation of our relationships. I think when we become moms, especially, we sort of have to put ourselves on the back burner to take care of, this creature that we have birthed into the world. And it's like, you have to, it's necessary and it's okay. But I think there's these other elements that sort of continue to kind of like push us on the back burner and like keep us there.
Mm,
So society sort of does that, our socialization. We're held to very high standards in
mm,
society around how we care for our family, how we care for our home, how we take care of our relationships. The other is just that I think we receive a lot of times messages growing up
mm,
around what it means to have needs. So whether it's you're too sensitive, you're too dramatic, you need too much. And so we become very uncomfortable. Once we're on the back burner, we become very uncomfortable trying to figure out how do we get off of this
mm,
spot? How do we assert ourselves? And what happens is a lot of times we start to feel resentful, we start to feel burnt out and frustrated. And this oftentimes gets directed toward those we love the most and we've
mm,
sacrificed for. But I think part of how it can kill our momentum is that if we find ourselves in a place where we're continually putting everybody's needs above ours, we find it hard to take a turn. We find it
mm,
hard to pursue whatever it is that lights us up, that brings us joy, that is going to bring maybe a different type of meaning to our lives. That's important for us to feel, complete and whole in our life, in our experience. I remember, I mean, I struggled with this deeply. So it's a really important piece of my books to me because I think a lot of women struggle with how do I define my needs, how do I articulate my needs, how do I assert them when I get a little bit of pushback. But
mm,
I remember in my own life sitting on my first book idea for years. I had this like half written proposal and I was just like, oh, I'll wait for the right time. When
mhm.
it's my turn. I'm sort of
Yep.
passively
Mhm,
waiting for my turn. And I went through this major sort of transition and doing work on my own life where I was like,
mhm.
nope, I have to take my turn. Nobody's giving it to
Yep.
me. We're all busy. We are in the momentum of life, and
Mhm,
that is propelling us forward. And I'm getting left. And I remember going to my husband, said to him, if I don't write my book now, it's never going to happen. There's never going to be a good time. And so, you good with this? Like, you good? Because it's going to require me to take up some space. And he was like, go for it. And so, I think, when we don't step into, really taking ownership of what we need, it will absolutely crush our momentum because there's like a momentum going on around us and we just get
mm,
buried by it.
mm. My story is very similar to yours when it comes to writing this book. I kept thinking, surely it'll be exactly what you said. Surely it'll be
Yeah.
my turn someday. And then I was approaching my 40th birthday, and I just
Yeah.
thought, when I turn 40, what will I have wanted? And I thought I would have wanted to try and fallen on my face at
Yes.
least, but I'd try. But like you said, it was hard to assert myself. It felt uncomfortable to put myself out there and
Yep.
say, hey, I want to do this. Because even in that, I feel like we're so conditioned that, to be the good girl on the sidelines and just, like
Yep.
you said, wait our turn. But then, like, to
Yep.
be the girl that's raising her hand and saying, hey, can I go next? Kind of felt uncomfortable.
Yes. It's very uncomfortable, but I think we have to be aware of how often we're sort of outsourcing our needs, kind of
Mm,
this that passivity of like waiting on the sidelines or well when, whatever, whether when my husband tells me I can take a break, then I'll take care of myself. And it's like
mm,
no more. I don't subscribe to the oxygen mask on first
mm.
mentality, but I do believe that we have to regularly get a turn in our family life. And if we're not going to assert that, no one's going to do it for us.
Okay, I want to put a pin on that, regularly taking a turn, and we're going to come back to that in a question.
Okay.
But before we do that, the reason I wanted to have you on for maintaining the momentum portion is that key piece is learning to spot what gets in the way of it. And we talked about that some of like not being wanting to take our turn, but I also think, and something you talk about in your books is guilt, comparison,
Mhm.
struggling to set boundaries. Oh my goodness, I am the biggest culprit. I'm learning that. Even carrying the
Mhm.
mental load. And you do a great job of defining those things. So, can we talk a little bit about what those things are and why they inhibit us so much?
Sure. So I'll start with guilt because that's like quite a bit, and then we can go from there. But so guilt, I believe, is a really big obstacle for a lot of women. And whether it's mom guilt or just relationship guilt or taking up space guilt, it's all, we have all these things that we'll feel guilty about. And so I think it's really important to have a clear definition of what it is and where it comes from, because then we can step into making changes around how we relate to it. So guilt is not a bad thing. For the most part, guilt has like a very important function, which is that when we experience guilt, it suggests that we're sort of stepping out of line or we're incongruent with what we believe or what we value. So it will prompt us when it's a healthy guilt to make changes in how we're showing up, how we're reacting, whatever. If we've lost it on our kids and you feel guilty, that's healthy. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's not something you want to wash away. It's like, okay, this is going to prompt me to repair, to learn, to do it differently, make some changes. However, a lot of women feel something that I call undeserved guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I conceptualize it is that we all have sort of these standards for how we live our life. But when we take standards to the extreme, I call them impossible expectations. When we're trying to live in a way that's aligned with these impossible expectations, we're going to regularly feel this undeserved guilt. And that is going to get in the way of us doing things that are really important, like taking care of ourselves, like speaking up for what we need, maybe pursuing, like sometimes we speak up for what we need to get pushback, and then we'll have that guilt and we'll have that self doubt. And so I believe that when you tackle this undeserved guilt, it allows you to continue to press a bit harder, which is necessary sometimes in our relationships when it comes to making changes. So if you want to think about how do I get to this place of really defining what my impossible expectations are, you can think of things like when it comes to motherhood, it might be, um, I believe a good mom,
Mm-hmm.
blank. And then you just kind of like free flow your ideas. It could be, I believe a good wife. I believe a good woman. You can, whatever you want to use, and just start writing down everything that comes to mind. You might look at it and be like, this is ridiculous. I don't really believe this, but ask yourself, am I living in a way that is actually though trying to achieve these impossible
Mm-hmm.
standards? Because a lot of us do. A lot of us like things like the belief that a good mom never puts herself before her kids. We're like, no, that's not true. But do you actually live that way? Because when you put yourself first, the few times that you do you feel an overwhelming, crushing guilt? Okay, well, you got to adjust the standard. And so that's the next step once you identify them is you have to challenge them. You have to rewrite them. And I think it can be really helpful for women to come up with almost like a one line, whatever you want to call it, a mantra or a
Mm-hmm.
motto. So when that guilt creeps up, you don't have to do all that work in the moment, but rather you just recall that one liner to help bring you back to that revision that you made.
Do you have a one-liner that you use?
One in motherhood that I've used time and time again is I'm a good mom who makes mistakes.
Hmm.
It's kind of a two-liner. I'm a good mom who makes mistakes, and when I make a mistake, it's an opportunity to teach my kids repair.
Hmm.
Um, that's one that I use time and time again. I think I've done a lot of work. I don't often feel guilty except when I've like messed up
Hmm.
anymore. So it's become more automatic. I think that's the thing about these skills is that the more you practice them, the more integrated they become, and then they don't take up a lot of energy anymore to put to work.
I remember, so as soon as you said that, I said, I was just having a conversation with my counselor, and
Hmm.
I said something like, "Oh, I can't miss a game of one of my kids. I just can't." Like,
Yeah.
she said, "Why?"
Yeah.
I said, "Because I don't know. I wouldn't be a good mom." She goes, "So you are a good mom if you go to every single one of your kids' games."
Yes.
And then I said it out loud, and I looked at her and I thought, no, but again, like you said, it was that impossible expectation. And so last weekend, we needed to divide and conquer. And
Yeah.
I had to recall that and say, you know what? I am a good mom, making the best choice for our family of six. We have four kids, and I'm going this way, and my husband's going that way, and that's okay. But we do,
Yes.
even in those little moments, we have these hidden things, as you say, that just plague us. As you said that, I was like, absolutely.
Yes. And it's so funny this morning as I was like not doing good things and I was scrolling on Instagram. I saw this post and it was something, I don't remember exactly, but it was something like, I polled my audience and here are the things they said their parents did that made like the biggest difference in their life.
Mm,
And one of them was like, they showed up to everything. And it's like, we also are consuming constantly, whether it's social media, whether it's the TV or movies or just what we absorb being in society. We're constantly absorbing these messages that
mhm,
shape these impossible standards. And it's like, you can't go to everything,
mhm.
especially when you have four children.
Yes.
It's just not doable. So I think, there is a real, pressure that we experience that amps up these impossible
Mhm.
standards because of just the world we're living in. And so we got
It
to
is.
protect our minds and our hearts.
And all of these little opinions and ideas that are meant to be good. I know another one that always questioned is you can't pour from an empty cup, but then there's the flip side.
Mhm.
Well, they'll say, yes, you can. You can pour from an empty cup. And so for the longest
Yes.
time, I'm like, okay, apparently I can. I'm doing something wrong if I can't pour from an empty cup,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Which is like it's just wild. I mean, you can for all those messages, you can find the
Yep.
exact opposite. And so it just we have to use so much discernment and
Mm,
how we consume this information because it really affects us, I think, in some pretty big ways. I remember I saw one about like kids who do jujitsu, and then it was like all these, don't quote me, so like all these positive outcomes. And I was like, oh no, like our kids quit jujitsu. I ruined my children's lives by letting them quit. I was like, okay, enough of this. Like, enough.
yes.
I'm just closing it down, shutting her
Yes.
down. Oh, I
Yes.
don't need this. So,
It's
yeah, I
such
sank
a
my.
good reminder though, because somebody listening is probably thinking through something that they've seen that they allowed to
Yeah.
speak truth into their lives when it's not true. Okay, so you do a beautiful job. I was trying to explain it and did not do as good of a job to my friend this morning about the mental load.
Mm,
Can you explain it a little bit? I love how you even use the analogy of dinner time and how dinner time is not just what's for dinner. So go ahead and explain
yes.
what it is.
Okay, so I'll give the 30,000-foot definition, and I'll give like a very quick in the weeds one. So the big definition is the mental load is the seemingly never-ending running to-do list we carry around in our minds, and it has two key components. The first is that the majority of aspects of the mental load are invisible. It's
Mm,
important because that means it's hard to explain. Like you said, it's hard to articulate what this is.
mhm.
It's hard to get appreciation around if people don't see what you're doing and aren't aware of it. And it can be hard to hand things off. The
Mm,
second component is that it takes up a bunch of cognitive real estate. This
mhm,
just means that it's crowding out space for other things in our lives,
mhm.
like peace, patience, presence, the ability to sit down and rest without feeling the guilt of needing to be productive, getting in the mood for sex, which is how I get buy-in from men to read my book, all these things. So it crowds that stuff out because it takes up space in our brains. A lot of times we'll say, oh, I've just had mom brain, and there's truth to that. But then also it's like, yeah, because now we have like a bazillion tabs open, and that
Mm,
takes up working energy. So the in the weeds definition really came about. I did interviews of men and women for my book, and one of the women said, just make a visual, please. Like somebody needs to do that. So I did. And it's three circles that form a Venn diagram. And what it is it's the three types of tasks that are associated with a mental load. So the first is the physical. This is what traditionally men think it is, which is like doing the things.
mhm.
It's why they'll say, just make me a list. And you're like, oh my gosh, seriously? So doing the dishes, doing the laundry. The second is the mental. And the mental is basically just thinking through the steps involved or making a list. It's a lot of work stuff is usually on the mental or, what do I need for dinner? And then the last is the kicker, which is the emotional labor
Mhm.
of home and family life. And the quick definition of that is it's the ongoing calculations, the ongoing cause and effect calculations that we make regularly to try to maximize positive experiences of members of our family. And the piece that's important, I think, to understand is that when it comes to home and family life, the majority of tasks fall at the intersection of these three circles, which is something I call the triple threat. And what that means is that one line item on a to-do list often unpacks to contain effort and energy in all three of these domains. This is why when our partners are like, make me a list, and we're like, it's too much to explain, is because each item unpacks to contain a ton of work. And that's why I say dinner isn't dinner, because dinner is the physical act of chopping and cooking and all the things. It's the mental labor of thinking about, what do I have in my pantry? What do I have in my fridge? What am I going to substitute for that inevitable missing ingredient? And then it's also the emotional labor, which is, how do I make sure it's nutritious? How do I make sure everybody will eat what I cook? How do I make sure we're not arguing about a bar at bedtime? So I feel like, especially women, men need to understand the definition so they can empathize and jump in and participate in a meaningful way. They got to speak the same language. And then women need to understand this because it because we feel guilty when we're overwhelmed. We feel like something is wrong with us. And when you say, "Hey, everything on your massive to-do list unpacks to contain a bazillion steps," it's
Mm-hmm.
normalizing. It's like oh, that's why I feel the way I do. Because we don't need more self-judgment. So I hope it relieves people of that.
I'm even thinking back to school or when your kids start a new school or
Yeah.
something like that, that it just, no wonder you feel even more stressed
Mhm.
and anxious and overwhelmed because those areas are being amplified. I feel like those circles get bigger in certain seasons of our
Mhm.
life. And that helps a lot
Yes.
explain that.
Yes. It's depending, a really important belief that I have that I don't hear a lot of people talk about is that the mental load, number one, isn't going anywhere. We tend to think like if we just turn the right dials, it's solved.
Mhm.
It's not. And that different your circumstances and season of life are going to affect the demand and the intensity of it. And so it just becomes so important that as a family unit, as a couple, but then also as a family unit, you're able to regularly talk about this with ease so that you can make adjustments in how you function.
Okay, let's talk about that because you recommend a check-in regularly with your spouse in the book, The
Mhm.
Better Share. Can you talk to us a little bit
Mhm.
about that and also how you get your kids kind of to buy in? And are you talking little kids or bigger kids?
So, yeah, so the check-in is not a new advice when it comes to relationships. So I'm just applying it to the mental load piece of the relationship. But it's basically have a weekly check-in where you come together with your partner and you talk about what's on your plates. It's like
Mm,
a logistical meeting.
mhm,
Hey, last week you did this for me and I really appreciated it, but I needed a little bit more support in this area. This
mhm,
week, looking ahead, here's where I need support. Where do you need support? You're just kind of checking in, getting on the same page. A lot of balls get dropped when we're just not on the same page around things.
mhm,
And you're making these adjustments. There's these, I don't need to get into all of it, but there's these side benefits that are really just like massive when you do a check-in regularly in your relationship. So, like, one of them is a lot of times for women, we carry the work of managing the relationship. So
mm,
like that's part of our mental load is we're the one like, hey, we need to have a date, or hey, I need to talk to you about this thing. And so it shares that just by scheduling the meeting together, it shares that responsibility a bit more, taking something off your plate. Also, a lot of women will be like, almost like collecting things they need to talk about, whether it's logistics or whether it's about just something with the relationship. And then they feel really anxious about bringing it up at the right time.
mhm,
And this gives you a agreed upon format for talking about these things. So there's way more benefits, but that's just a couple. And so that becomes it's a game changer if you do
mhm.
it regularly. And if your partner is defensive when talking about the mental load, then get my book. And
Yeah.
and it helps with work through all of that. So in terms of the kids stuff, so they could become part of this meeting at probably a pretty young age, actually, or you could have an aspect of the meeting that involves them. I think that would be really powerful. It's important. But in my book, I talk about how the goal with kids is to increase initiative taking. And
Mm-hmm.
initiative taking, and with our partners too, initiative taking requires a heightened sense of awareness. So
Mm-hmm.
seeing what's around you. And so one of the things that I talk about is doing a zone, giving kids a zone. You can do this. I mean, you know your kids best, but pretty young. You just change the zone. Um, and one of the requirements is it has to be a shared space. So it can't be like their room. I mean, that room that can be part of it, but it has to be a shared space. And because a lot of times it's like, I didn't get the Legos out, I don't have to clean them.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I've been doing, and this may be tweaked since I wrote my book, but what I usually do is I say, hey, 5 minutes, you're going to go see and do in your zone.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid goes to their assigned zone and they just got to look around, notice what needs done, and they take care of it. And it saves you from barking out orders, making a list. It normalizes that we clean up other people's messes. And yeah, it's just a simple way of bringing the kids in. There's other ways too, but that's one of them.
I love that. That's a great idea. And something you said as you were talking about the weekly check-in with your spouse was something that I learned recently is you said, you helped me with this, but I realized I needed your help with this. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think as women, we feel like, well, once we make the ask, if this is what I needed, we can't change our minds. And so
Mm.
I have been learning to communicate, hey, I thought that this was what I needed, but actually that wasn't as helpful, but I could use help here. Can you talk
Mhm.
to me a little bit about that? Is and also maybe on the flip side, okay, so we get, we ask and they help, and then you're like, oh, never mind. But on the flip side of that, if they help, I've had this in my marriage, they help and it's not done the way that I want it. And then my husband will
Mm.
be like, well, then why even bother? Because you just do it yourself anyway. So can you kind of talk to us about both of those things?
Yeah, I think in general, when it comes to needs, yeah, I think of it as math. So needs are either when you need something, you're wanting something to be added, something to be subtracted, or
Mm,
something to be multiplied. So, like a common argument my husband and I used to have was around expressions of appreciation. He'd be like, I'm doing it, I'm doing it. I'm like, no, I just need more. I
yes.
just need more of what you're doing. Because a lot of times they'll argue, sort of like, oh, I already do that. It's never enough for you. And so I think it's important to recognize our needs will change. So something we needed before might not need anymore. We might need a new something, and we might need more of something that we're already getting. And that's totally normal. That's just how it goes. It's not personal. It's
Yes.
not personal. A lot of times we take it personally, or our partners take it personally, but it's not. And so it can be helpful to just have that stated. Like I know after becoming a mom, my needs shifted in a massive way. I needed more of this thing,
Mm,
whereas before I needed more of something else. And so that's just part of life. In terms of things getting done properly, I talk about this in the book, but it's important to get aligned on your expectations. And that's sort of for each couple to navigate. I think I give the three L's. So sometimes you have to let one partner will have to level up to
mm,
meet the expectations. Sometimes the partner with the expectations will need to lighten up on their expectations. Like, does it matter
mhm,
exactly how a towel is folded? Some
mhm,
people it does, but sometimes it's just like, really? Um, and then the last one is sometimes we just got to let that one go. Like
mhm,
that's not an expectation that's serving us. That's really that important. And so it's important for both partners. This is an unpopular thing to say on social media, but it's important for both partners to really look at, their expectations and if they really need to be where they are, whether
mhm,
it's very low or very high. And I was working with a couple recently, and in that situation, the wife was very, very high expectations around just about everything. And I said, listen, that's fine if you want to continue doing it all, because the more control you exercise around how things are done, the more passive your partner will become
mm,
because they are sort of like your husband. Oh, if I don't do it right, might as well. And then on the flip side, sometimes passive partners will increase the amount of control we feel like we need to have around things. So it's a nuanced dynamic, but one that requires a conversation.
And I think we had that conversation, and I will say, have been able to wrestle with it. And we can even joke about it now. Like my husband's like,
Yes.
"Are you good with the way I fold towels?" I'm like, "Yes, it's fine."
Fine.
So there is a hope, right? You can get to the point of
Yes.
humor, like it's fine.
Yes.
And I think I finally came to the conclusion, like you said, and I think it's so valuable, is would I rather have it done or would I rather have it none or me doing it stressed out? And when I made that recollection in my mind, I was like, okay, I'd rather just have it done and it doesn't have to be done the exact way I would do it because it's done, check, mark, move on.
Yes. And the pushback that I've come across on social is sort of like, don't like, it's kind of nasty, but it'll be like, why are you such a child? Like, do it the right way, and and I get it. Like, there's a continuum or a spectrum of how partners show up in their relationships, and you know, so I want to recognize that, but also sometimes we kind of like moralize our way,
Mm,
where it's like that's the right way. So
yes.
it's like this unilateral standard that I think just it ends up backfiring for us. And also, I don't want to live in a marriage where like that's coming at me.
Mm,
So I know it's not always the most popular thing to say, but yeah, we both have to take a look at how we're showing up around these areas of our relationship.
I love that. And maybe also the intention, like, hey, they're trying,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Like we're all
yeah,
trying our best. Okay, I
yeah.
want to touch on two things that I think are really important before we wrap up. First of all, self-care. Can we talk about, I love in your book you say beyond bubble baths. Like, and I think we think pedicures, manicure. When you talk about self-care, what are you talking about for women?
I'm Yeah, I'm talking about our relationship with ourselves. So
Mm.
I know bubble baths are great. If that
Yeah.
moves the needle for you, like that's fine. I personally hate getting my nails done. I love them being done. I hate getting them done. That doesn't feel like self-care. I think a lot of times we've sort of cheapened the idea of self-care to be this laundry list of things that we need to do. And I think during my book launch for my first book, a million times I said, like, moms don't need more lists of things to do we don't have time for. And then we're going to feel guilty that we didn't get these things done. And so I think self care needs to be like the whole person. So self-care can be around your physical body, which is what a lot of we think of when we think of self-care as your physical self, but it can also be about how you think about yourself. It can be about
Mm,
how you navigate your emotional world. It can be about how you know yourself and gaining that insight. And that type of self-care, I talk very deeply in my book about how to do it, and I give a plan for moms. But that a lot of that self-care can be done right in the moment, right alongside your kids, and doesn't require a babysitter and
mm,
2 hours away or like a girls trip to feel recharged, because I think that the most sort of sustainable way for us to exist in motherhood is to sort of make these little tweaks all the time and
mhm.
how we care for ourselves. And eventually we'll get those big bursts, when space opens up, or maybe that is part of how you run your life. But we have to have something that's sustainable, that we can do every single day to make sure we're staying connected to ourselves, as we move through motherhood, which is so easy to become very disassociated from who we are.
And I often say awareness is our superpower. And I
Mhm.
think so often there might be things we do for self-care, but we aren't even attributing it to that, right? But then once we know, like reading your
Mhm.
book and being able to say, okay, this is self-care, now I can move
Mhm.
forward with intention, purposely doing those things, knowing that that's
Mhm.
fueling myself and helping me care for
Mhm.
myself.
Yes. Yes. Like it doesn't, yeah, we have to sort of think outside the box. After my book launches, my brain was fried. I think I listened to like 20 rom-com books
Yep.
on Audible. That was my self-care. It was like easy breezy. And then finally I was like, okay, I know this is too predictable now. I have to move on. But
Yeah.
that was a way of resetting for me. So we have to think about, we have to know ourselves, to
Mhm.
know what actually makes a meaningful difference in how we feel in our lives.
And I found this because when we had our youngest son and we brought him home via adoption, it was a very difficult season. And I did feel completely lost in all of that. But it was in those seasons where I was like, okay, a walk outside isn't just exercise. Actually, it's
Yeah.
fueling me. It changes my attitude. It helps me feel so much better, right? And so then it was like, okay, the walk is actually not negotiable, not because of my physical health, but
Yes.
because of my mental health. And so then it became a priority.
Yes. Yeah, and these things compound, and so it's kind of like stating the obvious, but sometimes we just have to hear these things. But
Hmm.
it's like if we do not take care of our emotional health, our mental health, and then we are exercising, like we're existing in motherhood or our relationship, most likely we are not our best selves when we're not taking care of those areas. So then what? We're more likely to lose our patience, snap at our kids, snap at our partner, get into an argument, and then we're going to feel guilt, and that guilt is going to deplete us even more. And so it's like we kind of just start ending up like in this deep, deep hole
Mm.
of depletion and burnout. And so all of these things, when we care for ourselves in meaningful ways that actually do move the needle, protect us from, these other things that are going to
Yeah.
actually take us deeper and deeper into burnout.
So good. Okay. Now let's talk about perfection. A lot of women wait
Mm.
to make a change until they have it all figured out or it's going to go perfectly, but it keeps them stuck. So, how do you help women that you work with focus on consistency over perfection?
Hmm. I've never been asked this before. I think, yeah, I'm not like an expert in perfection, but I think part of what I would say is like, how are you doing right now? Like, is what you're doing now working for you? Or are you wanting to feel different? If you're wanting to feel different, then it's about breaking something down into the most micro sort of dose of care and
Mm,
most manageable first step. And something that I've noticed in my own life and people I've worked with and I believe in deeply is that when you take one little sort of first step and you notice a positive shift, that adds to your positive momentum, which then reinforces the next step and the next step. So um, sort of microdosing your
mm.
care is where I would begin. What's the one thing you think you can step into that can help? And what would that look like in your life?
It's like you've read the book. You haven't, but that's what the whole premise of Tiny Tweaks Happy Life is
Yeah,
this idea of what is a tiny, tiny change. Because when you realize that you can in a small
yeah,
way, it builds evidence in your mind to say, hey, I can make a change. And now I can
yeah,
make maybe one more change. And all of those
yes.
changes, even as little as they seem, make a ripple effect in our life. So I love that.
Well, I can't wait to read it because it's gonna be amazing.
Okay. So, what would be one last piece of encouragement for the woman that's listening that just says, I am overwhelmed by life. My mental load feels very heavy. What would you encourage her with today?
Hmm. I would say that I would say to her, I want you to know how much personal power you have in your life and your relationships. You have agency, you
Mhm.
have options, you can make changes. And I think a lot of times when we're in that place, we feel really hopeless and helpless. And that keeps us in a place of being stuck. And so you have choices that you can make. And it's maybe that first little tweak, like
Mhm.
you will empower these women with. But yeah, one little shift that you make can really change the entire dynamic of your relationships in your life. And so you have a lot of power.
I love that. Such a good reminder. Okay, I ask every single guest on my podcast, this one included, have you made a tiny tweak in your life recently that has made life 100 times easier or lighter?
Um,
Besides the rom-coms that you've been reading for enjoyment.
I know I have moved on since then. For me personally, I've started taking a beat before I
Mm,
agree to things. I tend to be somebody who immediately gets really excited. I want to say yes to everything. And then I'll also be the person later who is like, oh, dang it, I did. I
Mm-hmm.
don't now I don't have time to do any of the stuff I need to do, or I need to finish this thing for work and I've used up all my time showing up in other ways. And so that little pause has saved me a lot of energy. It's helped me reflect and check in with myself on what I really want and need. And that's been a big difference maker for me.
I learned from somebody, and I share this in the book, that my phrase, I always find having, like you said, like a one sentence
Yeah.
mantra or something in these situations helps me. And I always just say, let me check my calendar and I'll get back to you. Even if I'm
Yes.
going to say yes, it just gives me a minute to assess what it is that I'm saying yes to and do I have the capacity. And I've also
Yep.
heard it said, if you could, if you can't do it, how did it say? Well, we'll scrap that part. Tim will rip that out because I'm going to butcher the thing. But yeah, I think if we just like let me check my calendar and I'll get back to you. And that has been so helpful.
Yes.
One of
That's
the
so helpful.
one of the things I remember when I first reached out to you, you said, I'm not taking any podcast requests this summer, but get back to me in the fall and we can reconnect. And I think sometimes as women, we think, oh, that boundary. But I actually loved that. I totally respected it. And it made me evaluate my boundaries when it comes to my time. And so I think sometimes we think, oh, this boundary, it might be
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but actually we have no idea the positive impact it can have on someone else.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. That wasn't easy for me, like not at all. And but I think part of the motivator for me too is that what I was doing before is I was saying yes to everything and I was like kind of salty about it.
Hmm.
It's like that's not on the person asking, that's on me. And so I had to really own that. And so it helps me show up better when I'm like doing it because I agreed to and I want to. So
That is something that my therapist helped me to do because I never want to inconvenience someone. So I
yes,
don't ask. I often won't ask. And she says it's on that person to set their boundary, whether they will say
yes,
yes or they say no. And that was also eye-opening because then on the flip
yes,
side, I get to set the boundary, whether I say yes or no. But that was just hard
absolutely.
as a woman
It
sometimes.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really
Okay,
is.
well, we'll leave it at that. We'll let people think about what they have on their calendar. Pause before you say yes. Morgan, okay, everybody's going to want to know more about you. Of course, we'll link your two books in the show notes, but where can they connect with you online?
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Dr. like Dr. Morgan Cutlip. That's my website too, drmorgancutlip.com. Have my offerings. I do audio courses. That's really like my main thing that I offer, and I do private coaching, and then my books. So simple
Awesome. Well,
enough.
you are a breath of fresh air, so much encouragement and practical advice. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
You liked this episode, it would mean so much if you'd share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review so others can find our show. Until next time, you can find me at Simple Purposeful Living on Instagram and Facebook.